The night stretched long over Manhattan, the skyline a restless, jagged line of steel and glass against a rain-heavy sky. Inside a fortified tower, Trump paced, his steps echoing on polished marble as Secret Service murmured into radios, their clipped words bouncing off the walls. He had been briefed. The president of Burkina Faso had requested a private audience. At first he had scoffed, waving a dismissive hand, muttering to an aide with that familiar smirk. Burkina worked, yet something in the tone of the request lingered. 2 days later, curiosity overrode arrogance, and he agreed. The meeting room chosen was a sealed chamber, guarded and humming with cameras. Trump walked in wearing his signature confidence like a tailored suit, chin raised, stride commanding, the performance of power rehearsed for decades. But seated across the polished table was a figure who shattered the script. Ibrahim Traoré, young and composed, did not rise immediately, did not scramble to impress. He simply looked up, his eyes calm, his posture unshaken, as if the room itself had already bowed to his presence. The contrast was cinematic. Trump's restless movements, the tapping of his fingers, the weight of his stare versus stillness, a stillness that seemed to quiet even the security detail hovering at the edges. A journalist in the corner, granted limited access, scribbled furiously in a notebook, sensing this was not going to be another exchange of platitudes and handshakes. Trump extended his hand, practiced grip strong, his smile polished for cameras. Even though there were none officially rolling, Ibrahim took it firmly, not forceful, yet carrying a weight that unsettled Trump. Then, without delay, Ibrahim leaned slightly forward, voice steady, his accent carrying both gentleness and conviction. "I didn't come for politics," he said, the words cutting through the stale air like a blade. "I came to speak about something greater." The room froze. For a moment, even the low buzz of the intercom seemed to hush. Trump's trademark smirk rose instinctively, an old shield, but it faltered halfway, as if his own body betrayed him. He leaned back in his chair, arms folding, eyes narrowing, studying the man before him, as though trying to measure his angle. Politics he understood, deals he thrived in. But this was an intrusion into a part of himself he preferred to leave bare. Ibrahim's gaze never wavered. He wasn't here to impress, to beg, or to negotiate. His calm silence pressed harder than 1,000 accusations, and Trump felt it. The journalist's pen scratched faster, each stroke a silent witness to a shift neither leader had anticipated. Trump attempted levity. "Greater, huh? You mean religion?" His tone was light, dismissive, but it carried an undertone of unease. Ibrahim shook his head once, slow, unhurried. "No," he replied softly, "not religion. Truth. The truth that changes men." Something in the phrasing unsettled Trump. He had heard leaders lecture, pastors flatter, critics accuse, but never a man speak with such absence of fear, as though stripped of everything politics could threaten. A flicker passed across Trump's face, quickly masked, but it was enough. Ibrahim saw it, and he let the silence draw out, each second pressing heavier than words could manage. The journalist glanced up briefly, sensing the rising weight. A guard shifted at the doorway, uncomfortable without knowing why. Outside, the rain battered the windows, steady, insistent, like a metronome counting down to something inevitable. Trump straightened, forcing a cough, shifting his cuffs. "So," he said, voice louder than before, "you want to talk truth? You came all the way here for that?" Ibrahim's reply was immediate, unflinching. "Yes, because without truth, a nation rots from the inside." The words landed, blunt and deliberate. Trump blinked, his jaw tightening, searching for a retort, but finding none quick enough. His hands tapped against the table, slower now, less assured. The smirk that had once been armor began to crack. The silence returned, stretching, long, suffocating. Ibrahim leaned forward slightly, his voice lower now, intimate yet commanding. His eyes searched Trump's, not for weakness, but for something hidden deeper. "Donald," he said quietly, each syllable carrying the weight of history, of war, of faith tested in fire. "When was the last time you prayed?" The question cut through the room like lightning splitting a storm. Trump froze, lips parting but no sound escaping. For the first time that night, the great performance faltered completely. The journalist's pen stopped. The guards exchanged glances. Outside, the rain slammed harder against the glass as if echoing the shattering silence within. And in that moment, the story had only just begun. The silence that followed questions seemed endless, the kind that pressed down on the chest until every breath felt like resistance. Trump's eyes flickered, searching for the armor he usually wore so easily. Yet something in the younger man's gaze pinned him still. Ibrahim did not rush him. He let the rain beat steadily on the glass, its rhythm a reminder that truth did not need to be forced. It waited, it endured. Then Ibrahim spoke again, but this time not about Trump. He spoke of himself, his voice slow and unshaken, drawing the room back decades to a night painted with fire and fear. He described his village, under attack, gunfire ripping the dark, his mother clutching him tightly in a clay storehouse while the world seemed to collapse outside. "I thought it was the end," he admitted softly, his words carrying the weight of memory. But she whispered, "Jesus will protect us." The journalist's pen scratched faster, capturing every syllable. Trump shifted, his arms folding. Across his chest, a barrier, yet his jaw clenched tighter with each word. Ibrahim's story unfolded further. The hours of hiding, the silence broken by shouts of men. The way dawn finally arrived, not as victory, but as survival. We lived, he said, his eyes steady on Trump. Not because we were strong, but because he was. The line hung in the air, quiet but immovable, and Trump's gaze dropped briefly to the table, as though avoiding something familiar, something unwanted. The young president didn't stop there. He spoke of a soldier from his nation who had lost everything: home, family, the very sense of belonging. Yet every morning, that soldier rose before dawn, knelt in the dust, and prayed for others, never himself. Ibrahim's voice was calm, stripped of grandeur, but the truth in it carried power sharper than any speech. That man still breathes today, he said, because faith gave him what politics could not. Trump's fingers tapped against the polished wood, slower now, his usual rhythm broken. He lifted his chin, forcing a skeptical laugh, though it rang hollow. So this truth of yours, he said, eyes narrowing, you're telling me it can save nations? Ibrahim leaned slightly forward, his tone unflinching. When leaders think they're gods, they destroy their people. When they know they're servants, they save them. The words hit like a hammer striking marble. Trump blinked, his face tightening, but the mask was cracking, the smirk no longer enough to shield him. The narration of the room deepened. Guards at the door stiffened. The journalist leaned forward without realizing it, the air heavy with something neither political nor performative. Trump's thoughts, drifted memories he rarely let surface, began to stir. His mother's voice returned unbidden. The quiet cadence of her reading Bible verses to him at night. A reminder that no matter how high he climbed, he must never forget the one above. He had buried that voice long ago, behind skyscrapers and applause, behind the steel of ambition. But now, the rain tapping steadily on the glass felt like her knocking again. He exhaled, long and uneven, staring at Ibrahim with a mixture of irritation and something he could not name. Ibrahim did not press. His stillness, his patience, filled the silence more loudly than speeches could. Trump adjusted his cuffs again, the familiar gesture of control, yet his hands lingered a second too long, betraying his unease. The journalist, unable to contain the weight of the moment, whispered to a colleague near the door, "Something's happening here." The words, though hushed, seemed to echo, as though the room itself acknowledged the shift. Trump heard it faintly, and though he bristled, he could not deny the tremor inside him. That Ibrahim continued with one final story, this time of a young refugee girl. She had nothing, no parents, no home, only loss carved into her small frame. When he had asked her what she wanted most, she did not say food or shelter. She said, "I want Jesus to take care of me." Trump's lips pressed tightly together, his eyes darting toward the window, as if the storm outside offered escape. Ibrahim's voice did not waver. "I carried her in my arms that day," he said. "She is in school now," smiling again. "But it was never me who saved her, it was the one she trusted." Trump swallowed hard, shifting in his chair. His hands moved restlessly, tugging at the cuff of his sleeve, as if he could loosen the weight pressing in on him. The rain struck harder, its sound merging with the pounding of his own pulse. His usual quick wit, the sharp deflections, all seemed to desert him. For a long moment, he said nothing. Finally his voice came low, almost as if it belonged to another man. "Maybe," he whispered, eyes fixed on the table, "maybe I've been running for too long." The journalist froze mid-sentence, pen lifted but unmoving, realizing the story had just crossed from political to personal, from spectacle to something that would soon rattle far beyond those guarded walls. The confession slipped from his lips like an accident, but the silence that followed confirmed it was something far more. "Maybe I've been running for too long," Trump had whispered, almost to himself, but the room had caught it, and unknown to them all, so had a microphone left active by a careless aide. The line drifted into the press audio feed, subtle, almost fragile, but unmistakable. Within an hour, the leak became wildfire. Anchors replayed the words, hashtags trended, news tickers crawled with disbelief. "He prayed, and I felt something I haven't felt in years." Across screens worldwide, the hardened image of Donald Trump was pierced by a tremor of vulnerability. Outside, chaos bloomed. Crowds gathered near the building, some shouting, some praying, all waiting. Inside, the world felt inverted. Trump sat by the rain-soaked window, staring at the storm, his phone buzzing relentlessly, with advisors demanding damage control. Yet he ignored them, his usual instinct to fight replaced with a strange stillness, almost fear. Finally he picked up the phone and called Ibrahim. His voice was quieter than the storm outside. "Tomorrow morning," he said, pausing as if weighing each word. "Stand with me." Ibrahim hesitated, not out of doubt but because he knew what such a request would mean. Still, his answer was steady. "Only if it is not for showmanship." Trump's reply was firm, almost desperate. "It's not. If you believe what you said, then maybe others need to hear it too." The next day, the White House press room swelled with bodies and noise. Journalists packed shoulder-to-shoulder cameras stacked in rows, lights flashing like lightning against the walls. The air buzzed with anticipation, cynicism, and disbelief. Everyone knew Trump thrived on spectacle, but something felt different as he stepped up to the podium. His swagger was muted, his eyes uncharacteristically downcast, as if every step forward weighed twice as much as it used to. Ibrahim walked behind him, calm, steady, his presence cutting through the frenzy like a blade through smoke. The room fell to a hush when Trump gripped the microphone. For a moment, his mouth opened but no words came. Then, voice raw and uneven, he began. "Something happened to me this week," he said. "Something I can't explain, but something you all deserve to hear." The crowd shifted, every finger hovering above keyboards. Then came the confession, heavy and unpolished. "I haven't prayed in over 30 years, not since my mother died." Gasps rippled through the press corps, disbelief crackling in the air. Some reporters instinctively looked at one another, searching for cues, but no one typed. It was as if the collective breath of the room had been taken away. Trump's hands gripped the podium tighter, his voice faltering, yet pushing forward. When he spoke, when he prayed, I heard her voice again. He blinked rapidly, eyes glistening. For the first time in decades, I felt like she was near. Ibrahim stepped forward then, his voice low but steady, not rising above the room but filling it nonetheless. "I did not come to debate politics," he said, his gaze sweeping across the crowd. "I came to speak of something greater, the love of Jesus, who sees beyond power, beyond pride, beyond our mistakes." His words were not loud, but they pressed into the silence with a weight no one could dismiss. Trump lowered his gaze, a tear slipping down his cheek, caught by the merciless flash of cameras. He did not wipe it away. Instead, he turned, his voice breaking. "Would you pray again? Right here." A ripple of shock moved across the room, but Ibrahim simply nodded. He bowed his head, placed a hand lightly on Trump's shoulder, and began to pray, not in political rhetoric, not in rehearsed lines, but in raw, simple words. "Lord Jesus, we stand in a place of power, but without you it is empty. We ask for mercy. We ask for hearts to be softened. We ask for truth to be known." The silence was immense, almost unbearable, as his prayer filled the air. Reporters who had built careers on skepticism wiped tears from their eyes. Hardened correspondents set down their pens. Some bowed their heads instinctively, others simply froze, transfixed by the weight of the moment. Across the world, live streams froze people mid-scroll. Cafes quieted, homes stilled, even airports slowed as screens glowed with the unfolding. Seeing this was no longer politics. It was something timeless, sacred, larger than the men at its center. Trump's head remained bowed, his lips trembling, his chest rising with uneven breaths. The room felt stripped of spectacle, left only with silence, tears, and the raw truth of two men, one steady, one breaking. Both caught in a moment no one had predicted. The press room dissolved into history as soon as the cameras cut, yet its echoes lingered in every corner of the world. By nightfall, Trump sat alone by a wide window, the rain finally giving way to mist over Washington, his silhouette heavy against the dim light. Advisors knocked, pressed, pleaded through the door for statements and strategy, but he ignored them, their voices muffled into the background. For once he did not reach for his phone to post, did not summon staff to craft a headline. Instead, he scrolled through photos long hidden in digital archives. Images of his mother smiling faintly, Bible resting on her lap. His thumb hovered on her face as if a touch could bring back her voice. Messages from old allies flashed on the screen, warnings, disbelief, reminders to seize control, but he let them go unanswered. His empire, once deafening, felt like a hollow shell now, its silence heavier than applause ever was. Even neighbors who once sought proximity now kept their distance, their glances edged with unease, unsure whether to mock or to mourn what they had witnessed. The crowds outside shifted in tone too, the jeers that usually trailed his movements dulled into a stunned quiet. People gathered not out of anger alone, but in contemplation, whispering, debating, some even praying. His career felt fragile, teetering on the edge of collapse. Yet within him something stirred, awake, an old voice, buried but not lost, that asked questions no political rally could answer. Across the ocean, Ibrahim returned to Burkina Faso without spectacle, refusing every interview that came his way. Reporters crowded him, microphones thrust forward, questions flying like arrows, but his response was calm, unwavering. "This isn't about politics," he told them. "It's about the heart of a man." His words spread faster than his image, carried in headlines, reprinted in sermons, whispered in conversations between strangers. Churches across his homeland overflowed, not with chants for power but with prayer. People gathered on dirt roads, and in candlelit rooms, not seeking spectacle but humility. What had begun in a guarded room in New York seeped quietly into villages, cities, and distant lands. Muslims, Christians, and even those with no faith at all found themselves speaking about forgiveness, about leadership not as dominance, but as service. The narration carried through scenes like fragments of a film reel, a family in Lagos pausing to pray together for the first time in years, a cafe in Paris where strangers debated humility over coffee, A classroom in South America, where a teacher replayed the leaked clip and asked her students what they thought it meant to lead. The moment had transcended borders, slipping past the grasp of politics, becoming something intimate in the lives of people who had never seen themselves reflected in leaders before. Back in America, Trump's empire felt colder. Phones rang unanswered. Allies grew restless, their loyalty measured in calculations now rather than conviction. He walked through gilded halls that suddenly seemed smaller, each reflection in the mirrors reminding him not of victory but of vulnerability. He felt the weight of being alone, though this time it was not emptiness, it was the beginning of reckoning. He sat at his desk, the Bible he had avoided for decades lying open before him, its pages stiff with disuse. His lips moved in halting silence, words forming not for broadcast, not for crowds, but for himself. Meanwhile, Ibrahim stood before his people in Ouagadougou when a journalist dared to ask the question on everyone's mind: what exactly had he told Trump that brought him to tears? Ibrahim's answer was simple, delivered with the same calm that had unsettled a superpower. No matter how high we rise, he said, we all kneel before the same God. The crowd fell quiet, struck not by grandeur but by the weight of simplicity. It was a line that would outlive the moment, etched into memory as more than a headline and echo of humility. Across nations. And so the story closed, not in spectacle, but in silence. Trump remained in his residence, alone but no longer entirely empty, his Bible open, his lips moving through a prayer no one else could hear. Outside the city pulsed on, but within those walls a man long hardened by power bent quietly, invisibly, toward something greater than himself. It was not redemption yet, but it was a seed, planted in the soil of humility. A reminder that poetic justice often arrives not through thunder but through whispers, not in collapse but in the fragile beginnings of change.